This video was brought to you by the ILC. Hello again, welcome to episode 13. In this episode, we're going to be solving quadratic inequalities that use this sign right here, and that sign means greater than or equal to. Just like episode 12, most of the problem is going to work like any other quadratic problem, but with a couple extra bits there at the end. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, our equation today is x squared minus 4x is greater than or equal to 12. As before, our first step is going to be to move everything to the same side. That's pretty much always how it's going to go for quadratics. So we will subtract 12 from the right and subtract 12 from the left. If we do that, we'll have x squared minus 4x minus 12 is greater than or equal to 0. I'm going to go ahead and box this in because we're going to need this for later on. Once we have everything on the same side, our next step is generally going to be to factor it. So we have to write our parentheses and say that it's greater than or equal to 0. And again, we think of factors of negative 12. Well, if you've watched episode 12, you know this answer already, but let's think this through. We could try negative 6 and positive 2, because if you multiply them together, you do get negative 12. And negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. That does match the middle number, so those are the right numbers to use. And we'll have x minus 6 and x plus 2 as our factors. Now that we factored, again our third step is going to be to find the points of interest. Again, what I mean by finding the points of interest is anywhere where it equals 0. So we'll have to solve the left-hand piece and the right-hand piece. Say x minus x equals 0. If we move the negative 6 to the other side, we'll have x equals 6. That's our first point of interest. Now we do the other side. Say x plus 2 is equal to 0. If we subtract 2 from both sides, we'll end up with x equals negative 2. So our points of interest are 6 and negative 2. So just to recap what we've done so far, our equation is x minus 6, x plus 2 greater than or equal to 0, and our points of interest are x equals 6 and x equals negative 2. Once again, we will mark them on the number line. X equals 6 goes here. X equals negative 2 can go somewhere over to the left. Again, the left arrow is negative infinity, and the right arrow is positive infinity. Now that we've marked everything on the line, let's check the condition that the equation gives us. So the condition, according to this equation right here, is that it must be greater than or equal to 0. That means if it's positive, that's okay. If it's 0, that's okay too. If it's positive or 0, it is part of the answer. However, if it's negative, that's not part of the answer. Once again, we will have 3 regions like before. The negative infinity to negative 2 will be region A. The negative 2 to 6 will be region B. And 6 to infinity will be region C. And we'll have to see which regions give us positive numbers and which regions gives us negative numbers. If it's positive, then it is part of the answer. If it's negative, it's not part of the answer. Okay. Now the one thing we do know is that when it's 0, it is part of the answer. So that means both of our points of interest are part of the answer. So that means, instead of using an open dot like last time, we're going to put in a closed dot on both points of interest. Go ahead and fill this in. There it is. Now, what we should do, if we're going to check region A, we're going to pick a point that's between negative infinity and negative 2. Hopefully one that's easy to work with. Let's try x equals negative 3. And we are going to plug x equals negative 3 into the equation and see if it's positive or if it's negative. So our equation says x minus 6, x plus 2, but we're going to substitute in negative 3 for x. So our equation becomes negative 3 minus 6, negative 3 plus 2. Now we could do all the algebra out right here, but it's more important to know the signs of each piece. If we look at the first piece, we have negative 3 minus 6. More important than knowing the number is just knowing that if you have a negative and a negative, it gives you a negative. Our second piece is negative 3 plus 2. Well, negative 3 is bigger than positive 2. That'll also give you a negative. And a negative multiplied by a negative gives you a positive number. That does match this condition here on the top. Positives are okay. I'm going to mark region A with positives, and I'll circle it to show that it is part of the correct answer. I'll even bold it in like this with the green. Now we will move on to region B. Region B is between negative 2 and 6. We'll have to pick another x that's in between those numbers. I like 0. That's pretty easy to use. So let's check it out. Instead of writing x, we will write 0. So we'll have 0 minus 6, 0 plus 2. Well, 0 minus 6 is a negative number, and 0 plus 2 is a positive number. If we multiply a negative by a positive, we'll end up with a negative answer. However, our condition here at the bottom said that negative is not part of the solution. So that means region B is not part of the right answer. Let's continue to region C. Let's pick a number that's in between 6 and infinity. Let's say x equals 10. We're going to plug that 10 into the original equation. So wherever we see x, we will have 10 instead. So our equation becomes 10 minus 6, 10 plus 2. Well, 10 minus 6 is definitely a positive number because 10 is bigger than 6. And 10 plus 2 is also positive. So if we take a positive times a positive, our answer is definitely going to turn out positive. That means everything in region C is positive, and region C is part of the answer. So if we're going to write a solution, our solution is going to be region A union region C. So we have to say what region A is and say what region C is. Our region A is going to go from negative infinity to negative 2. And region C is going to go from 6 to infinity. Now we're going to state the answer here a little bit different from how we did last time because we have a closed dot on negative 2 and 6. If your graph contains a closed dot, that means you are going to have to write it in brackets rather than parentheses. On the negative 2, we are going to put a bracket, and on the 6, we're going to put a bracket. Now, infinity never has a bracket, so we're going to put parentheses next to those. So our final answer is going to be negative infinity to negative 2, bracket on the negative 2, and then 6 to infinity with a bracket on the 6. And that will be our final answer. Alright, so just to recap what we've done, After we found the points of interest, our procedure is going to change depending on what inequality sign we have here. It's very important to check your conditions to see what is part of the solution and is not part of the solution. Once you know what is and is not part of the solution, we're going to check a point from each of the regions we have, and then if that point works, then that entire region will satisfy the solution. However, if that point does not satisfy the conditions, like region B didn't, then nothing in region B will satisfy the solution. Remember, in your answer, only include the regions that did satisfy the solution, not the regions that don't. Well, that's all we have for today. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.